Okay, everyone. Oh, it's acting up. Hold there with me. Here we are. Okay, and we're live.
Microphone is muted and your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. The Planning Committee is a decision-making committee of the Council, and it is important that the set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application, either on paper or electronically. We will first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, and then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speakers. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the planning officer. It should be noted that committee members and officers may use electronic devices for reference throughout this meeting. The committee will debate and vote on each application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by raising myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hands clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I'll ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. A few housekeeping announcements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is the one you came in. And it's in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and then go to assembly point 9 in the area outside the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after application has been debated are welcome to do so by the front door in reception. When the meeting is finalised, I will ask for confirmation that a live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building. Remember to sign out as you leave. Now back to the agenda.
All I had to do was just jump through some paperwork formalities. That paperwork got dragged out.
Agenda item 2 is apology for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence for receiving councillors Tim Bearder, Joe Robb and Zai Mohammed.
I was told 10%.
Sorry, who was the last one?
I was told 10%, take it or leave it. I had the offer in writing, but it wasn't.
Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. To adopt and sign as a correct record the planning committee meetings, the meeting held on the 5th of June.
They've lost the other job, right? That's what's so
Thank you.
Sorry, check out the proposer.
Proposer, second there. All those in favour? Thank you. Declaration of interest. So receive declarations of disclosable peculiar interest, other registrable interest and non-registrable interest, or any conflict of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting.
This is when we were very
I see none.
gentle.
Urgent business. To receive notification of any urgent business.
No urgent business.
No urgent business. Thank you.
No.
Public participation. Public participation.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, we'll go now to the planning applications, and we start with planning application P24 S0998/73 Sable Yard, Chinner Road, Chinner Road, Towersey. And planning officer is Caitlin Philpops.
Good evening, members.
Can't hear me? I love you. No, can't hear me?
What do you say?
Okay, so this, I don't know how heavy this is going to be.
application is called to planning committee as officers' views conflict with the views of Cowley Parish Council.
Okay, you can lower it some more.
I don't think it's that heavy unless you're holding it all.
Historically, the application site contained 4 single-storey buildings granted planning permission in 1963, approved and built in connection with the private equestrian uses across the wider site. The site lies immediately south of Cough Cottage, opposite a line of residential development to the west of Richina Road and adjacent to the existing built-up area of Powersey. The site lies inside of the village boundary as identified within the policies map of the Towersey neighbourhood plan. A watercourse runs north-south between the site and adjoining highway.
So I'm definitely not the only one who's gone on the internet and browsed for certain things, whether it's looking for a restaurant or you're trying to figure out
The site has planning permission for the change of use of the land and the addition of 2 detached 3-bedroom houses with associated parking, amenity space and shared vehicular access granted under the host permission. The host permission was granted subject to a number of drainage conditions requiring the submission of details prior to the commencement of the development. This application seeks a minor material amendment to the planning permission and is submitted with revised plans for plot 1 and additional information to see a number of the originally attached drainage conditions removed or revised for implementation conditions.
still looks like this, see? So some of these have to be replaced. We knew that though.
Just for a bit of background for everyone, our house is like built on a rock, so they've done some really weird things with this crawl space that makes it a very
Amendments to the approved plans of the dwelling across plot 1 include an increase in ridge height of the forward projecting gable by 600 millimetres and the addition of a gable to the rear of the property, as shown on the 3D comparison drawings submitted in support of this application and pasted below for reference.
center, like 48 inches on center. So we were actually wondering why the heck they had this like weird plywood thing here and like what it was doing.
In officer's opinion, the amendment proposed would not significantly alter the approved form, scale, massing, character and appearance of plot 1 or the scheme as a whole when viewing it from the wider public vantage points, and that the introduction of the rear-facing gable would be in keeping with the character of the scheme as a whole.
Okay, now my personal favorite find. We're downstairs in the electrical room.
The development has a side-to-front relationship with Cough Cottage. Given the positioning of the development to the south of the adjoining neighbour, officers find that the development will have some impact on the natural light currently afforded to this property.
This is the sewage pipe.
However, the proposed dwellings are set well back within the site, and the house on plot 1 is positioned no less than 4.5 metres from the shared boundary at any point.
There's a hole in the sewage pipe. Okay, who shot
Given the
this?
relatively modest heights of the proposed dwellings and the separation of spacing between properties, in assessing the acceptability of the proposal under the host permission, officers found that the development would not result in any significant and measurable harm to the amenity of the existing neighbouring property in terms of light or outlet.
So, yeah, we found a nice
This application to vary the approved plans is supported by the submission of the computer-modelled sum path studies, which compare the differing effects of the approved and proposed scheme on the direct sunlight reaching the neighbouring property.
This whole portion of the roof.
Overall, officers are satisfied that the revised scheme would have no measurable increased impact on the amenity of the neighbouring property in terms of light or
The
outlet.
very first part of the house that leaked because of this pipe. That one nail is responsible for this whole house's demise.
Both plots 1 and 2 include the provision of windows and or roof lights across the northeast elevations. As a way to protect the amenity of the existing property and the amenity of plot 1 from overlooking from plot 2, this recommendation is made with suggested conditions to see the windows obscure glazed and fixed shut below 1.7 metres.
We have our beam running this way alongside the floor.
Yeah.
And normally when you have a beam running that's supporting your floor joists, it's supposed to be
This application is submitted with additional information to see a number of the originally attached drainage conditions removed or revised to implementation conditions. Having reviewed the plans and supporting information, the council's drainage engineer raises no objections to the development proposed, subject to compliance conditions suggested with this recommendation.
But then they just kind of left it.
They ran out of lumber.
They just like, it's okay, it's fine, no problem, no problem.
The amendments proposed as part of this application do not affect the previously proposed biodiversity mitigation and enhancement measures, access and parking arrangements, or contaminated land assessments.
That concrete
In officer's opinion, the proposed development is acceptable with recommended conditions. The application is therefore recommended for approval.
Thank you, Caitlin. Right, I have one speaker registered, which is Tim Shreve from Towers Forest Council.
Yeah,
Foundation good though.
because this wasn't even on the plans that we bought from the city, like the old.
Could I have my first image?
Yeah, so it started out that we were so excited.
Right, Tim, you have 5 minutes from when you first start speaking.
We have a concrete floor, and then we realized all the other issues.
Okay, Towsley Parish Council object to this application. We are not opposed to the building of 2 houses on the plot, which is within the area identified for housing within our recently adopted neighbourhood plan. We did not object to the permitted plans, but strongly object to this amendment on 2 grounds. This is because of the addition of the new rear ridge and the higher front ridge of plot 1. Because we think they will have a severe impact on the amenity of the neighbouring Croft Cottage and also on the street scene. Can I have the next image?
No problem. No problem. No problem.
It was acknowledged when plans were approved that there would be some impact on the natural sunlight currently afforded to Croft Cottage, but it was suggested that this impact would be marginal. What's now proposed is now completely contrary to policy DES 6 and also breaches the 25-degree rule. And importantly, the ground level of Croft Cottage is lower than the development plot as shown in the approved plans. Can I have the next slide, please? So, sorry, can you go back one?
It's fresh and it hurts.
Okay, so there is this 25-degree rule where if the angle between the midpoint of the windows of existing property and a new property is more than 25 degrees, special measures have to be made to reassure that the impact on the neighbouring property is acceptable. And the developers have attempted to do that using sun shadow diagrams. Can I have the next slide? Which we think are potentially misleading and actually underestimate the effects of shading.
My wife finally came stumbling through the door at 6:47 a.m. this morning. And you were probably up all night waiting for her. I know the exact time because I was worried.
Okay.
She was wearing a dress she didn't leave.
So first of all, these are the shadow diagrams of the proposed plan, and at the bottom right is the winter solstice, and it's interesting that we have shading at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Unfortunately, the sun sets at 3:58 on that particular day, and to the south of the site there is an old railway embankment which casts shade over the whole site from about 2:40 p.m. And where you do have some sunlight, like top left at 9 o'clock in the morning, the sun is only 6 degrees above the horizon, so you're not really going to get much benefit of the sunlight at that time of day into Croft Cottage. So from about 9:45 till sunset, the downstairs windows of Croft Cottage will be sequentially or almost totally in shade. That house will not benefit from sunlight, even though it's received direct sunlight through those windows for about 250 years. If we take into account the new rear ridge height and elevation of the front ridge, and taking into account where the sun rises on the horizontal plane and how high the sun is in the sky throughout the year, between October the 26th and the 16th of February, Croft Cottage will be in shadow because of the elevated front ridge and the new rear ridge. So that means that Croft Cottage will not receive sunlight for 31% of the days of the year. We think that this is actually unacceptable. So can I have the next slide? So your policy DES 6 is about impacts on amenity of neighbouring use, etc. And there's an emphasis on
That feeling of
sunlight,
excitement is
30
gonna be
dominance,
seconds remaining.
visual intrusion. It will also affect Yosemite. So we would suggest that this proposal is contrary to DES 6, and any benefit of the extra room upstairs in this new development is outweighed by the detrimental effect on the amenity of Croft Cottage and to a lesser extent Mole End, which is Yosemite. So we ask you to reject this proposal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shreve. Councillor Shreve. Councillors, got any questions?
Yes. So Tim, the Yosemite bit that you were just getting to, is that about privacy or shading?
It's about privacy and light, because when they look from their back part, they'll just see a wall of a building and it will obscure quite a lot of the sky that they can see from that back part of their house. And that's really important for the gentleman who lives there, who has certain I call them illnesses. So
does the patio of Yosemite face towards the structure? Is that
it does. So that will also be in shade as well.
that's nice.
So,
Councillor Gordon Creed.
thank you, Chair. So Tim, can I just absolutely clarify that the parish is fine with the plans that were approved because they don't affect the sunlight to Croft Cottage and or Yosemite?
Okay, so what was approved does have an effect, but is far less than the effect of this. So as a compromise, that was acceptable.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting my post to get any attention at all.
Councillor
I
Arts.
just figured I'd use
Yeah, listening to your degrees of
I made the post in the morning and by
the
2
sun
she was still
and
pumped
the
out
shade.
of the room.
The plan I have in front of me,
For good sleep in before you
I'm
gotta
sure
go for a
most
messy
people where they live,
I
the
had
sun goes
processed
down
things
in the
I
west.
had a rough plan in my head.
So
but
looking at
set
this
in motion.
plan
Look at this
here,
lady. Her taking a nice little nap after ruining your
the
marriage.
degrees you're going to
Time to
be
move in the
that
shed.
you've given
I made a short list of
when the
questions I
sun
wanted
is over the
answers to.
far side
Gathered
of
all
the
my
road over near
contacts left,
Laurel Cottage
etc.
or
Then I went
Rose
to the bedroom and
Cottage.
started
So
packing myself a suitcase.
that really
No,
doesn't
the 20,
substantiate your
I did consider it,
argument
but also
on
I'm
the
not overly attached
2060.
to this place.
So
Yeah,
at
leave her.
midday
Leave her
between
chew a cake
October
right by herself.
the 26th and the
We
16th
just
of
rent and I'm
February,
in a lucky
the
enough
sun
situation
is
to
only
save the paying
26
half the rent
degrees
for 2
above
months
the
isn't gonna
horizon.
financially end
So
me.
that
I
means
mean,
that
actually,
then
it's a little bit nice.
Croft
You might
Cottage is
probably
shaded
on the
by
lease, like
the housing.
at least you don't share assets together. Gets a little messy when you share a house. It'll stink
Let's
a
come
little
back
bit.
to that.
I won't
Yeah,
lie, but I'll make it.
And you're saying 600 millimeter higher makes how much difference of
She
shading?
ended up waking up about
In terms of percentages, I can't tell you, but the sun is below.
around the room and started
below that.
bawling. Did she like forget what
Okay,
she
thank
did?
you.
Was she like so unbelievably drunk that she
Okay,
was just a different
thank you,
person?
Councillor
Like,
Street.
I don't understand the delay. Maybe she thought you wouldn't leave. I don't know.
Okay, now ward councillors are both with us. Do you wish to speak as ward councillors
Well, the
or say
crocodile
on
tears,
a
honey.
committee?
I'll go.
So we are. Yeah,
I don't wish to speak either.
yeah, okay. All right, so we'll go back to Caitlin for any questions of the planning officer.
Comforting her. Why would you? Those are crocodile tears, honey. Why do they call it crocodile tears instead of alligator tears?
Yes.
Yeah,
I had told her
This question, just looking at the
and text messages from her phone.
appendix A or the backlog,
got
got the pot one and pot two marked, and Croft Cottage and Yosemite, also Mole End. They seem to be comparing these two the plots to the properties across the road, which are much closer together than what we're looking at in this proposal. Is that does this plan is a true reflection of the closeness of the properties on that road?
Yes, I would say that is reflective of the context. I guess the difference is that Croft Cottage does have a front to side relationship with the development. And as pointed out, there is the 25-degree rule. But I would like to say that the 25-degree rule is applied when their development faces directly opposite a window,
Yes.
not at an oblique angle like it does in this scenario. So it wouldn't be the way that you would measure the impact of light reaching those windows if you're applying the VRE guidance.
So your view is not a cramped, that overall thing, not cramped.
I think given the unconventional relationship Pop Cottage has to development is well cited, it's set back within the site and it minimises its impact, and I don't consider it significantly impact the light reaching the screen.
Okay. I'm waiting. Is that a question?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Sadler.
So, just on that, so those two new dwellings are going to be cited further back, aren't they? So in fact, so they're kind of in line with Pop Cottage and Yosemite. Is that right?
Well,
So,
Pop Cottages. So if you look on up on the screen here, Pop Cottage is the one immediately adjacent to the Red Line site, and faces south effectively, and obviously Yosemite is a neighbour but one. I guess the dwellings on the proposed development are roughly in line with Yosemite and Pop Cottage in that instance is the anomaly and is set forward close to the highway.
okay, but there's this issue about the window at the top facing that north.
Oh, facing northeast. There are some, yes, but I mean, the sill heights are shown as above 1.7 metres from finished floor level, and the host permission was conditioned to have all northeast facing windows on both plots 1 and 2 of steel glazed and fixed shut below 1.7 metres to prevent overlooking. So with that condition in place and actually looking at the drawings as drawn, I would say there is no issue of overlooking.
Okay, before we go into debate, Mr. Rowland has turned up. I can see on the screen. Can I ask you to turn your camera off, please, Mr. Rowland? Yeah, an open relationship, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Right, any further questions for the opposite? No, we're looking for a proposal. Councillor Arlott.
I'll propose officer recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Just to speak down.
Essentially, I do understand the issues with the shading. However, it's not significant enough for it to be turned down in this case. And if we turn down this application, my own view is it wouldn't appeal very easily.
I tend to agree. Well, I'll go with Councillor Arlott for his reasons for recommending approval.
Yeah, Chairman, I think when you look at the plan here, both plot 1 and plot 2 are set well back from cottage. And if there is going to be a lack of sun going over the small section on plot 1, which already has planning permission, I think it's almost going to be negative to what's there at the moment. I can understand for raising the roof, the idea of raising the roof obviously is to get more space, more headroom in there, so I can totally understand that. But for 600 mil, 2 feet on a very short span there, I don't believe the loss of light, if there is a loss of light, it would be very, very minimal, if at all. That would be my view. And they already have planning permission, I think, to turn it down for that. And I won't mention about going for appeal.
Okay, thank you. I have a proposal for acceptance. Proposed and seconded. Open the debate. Councillor Sadler.
I think the point that Councillor Shreve raised about privacy is probably legitimate here. The bulk and scale of this building and the ridge height as well, being much higher, would appear to be grounds for turning it down, actually. I think that probably would sit, but that's just my opinion. That's the point, yeah.
Okay, any further debate?
Just along those lines, that at some level, the people who live there know they're refusing on the grounds of overlooking an amenity that exists that the people have to live with and will forever have to live with. And I just want to, whilst I agree that it probably would not win it appeal, I just want to log my sorrow, I guess, or my empathy that this is a thing that we have to pass on those roads.
Okay, thank you. Any further debates? No further debates. I'll go back to Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I'll just pick up the item on privacy. I'm one person that do not believe that people stand in their bedroom windows overlooking properties and just stand there all day long looking at them. I just don't believe the large majority of people, probably 99.9% of people, do that. So I don't think there's a privacy reason that we could turn this down.
Okay, I'll then thank you, Councillor. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal for approval, please show. Those against? Okay, that is carried. So thank you, Philip. Right, I'll go to item 8 on the agenda. 324 S0911 Park House Parkview in Sydenham. Not too far away. But the planning officer this time is Paul Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a detached dwelling on the edge of the village of Sydenham East. Your officers consider that the principle of development in relation to infilling with new build dwellings is supported in this settlement by Local Plan Policy H16 and Neighbourhood Plan Policy SID1 and the fallback outline planning permission for residential development for a dwelling, as discussed at paragraphs 7.2 to 7.4 of the report. As outlined in paragraphs 7.5 to 7.9 of the report, your officers consider that the proposed siting, scale, form and detailing of the proposed dwelling would be sufficiently in keeping with the variety of dwellings in Sydenham East to sustain local distinctiveness, given that the buildings in Sydenham East are not subject to any heritage asset designations. Your officers also consider that the proposed dwelling would not have a significant adverse impact on one of the important views referred to by policy SID7 of the neighbourhood plan. Your officers consider that the interrelationship between the proposed dwelling and its closest neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light, outlook and privacy, as covered in paragraphs 7.9 to 7.11 of the report. The proposed outdoor amenity space would accord with the design guide recommended standards for a dwelling of this size. In the expert opinion of the local highway authority, the proposed access and parking arrangements would not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway and pedestrian safety in compliance with Local Plan Policy Trans 5. The examination version of Neighbourhood Plan Policy SID2 stated that all new residential developments will consist of dwellings with 2 and 3 bedrooms only, but the Neighbourhood Plan examiner recommended modifications to change it to the current wording, because its prescriptive nature was not underpinned by specific and local evidence. Consequently, your officers consider that provision of a 4-bedroom dwelling would contribute towards the identified district-wide need. Matters relating to ecology, external lighting, drainage, tree and hedge protection, landscaping and carbon reduction could be dealt with through the recommended conditions to the satisfaction of the relevant specialist officers. Your officers consider that the application would comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis it is recommended that planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Paul. Now, the speakers, I have 3 speakers, Michael May, Ian Gray and Ian Slater. I call the first one as a representative of Sydenham Parish Council, which is Councillor Michael May.
I'm also Parish Councillor.
You're not ready to speak.
And I genuinely want to know your thoughts. And by the way, I just want to say thank you again for all of the congratulations on my engagement. I see all the comments.
Okay, Councillor May, you have 5 minutes for any substitute.
No, the first slide, please.
Just to start with, I just want to put a quick summary in relation to neighbourhood plans, local plans, and the NPPF. In the NPPF, it says that non-strategic policies should be used by local planning authorities to communities to set out more detailed policies for specific areas. And one of those is in relation to establishing design principles. Paragraph 29 of the NPPF is that neighbourhood planning gives communities the power to develop a shared vision for their area. And paragraph 30 is once neighbourhood plans have been brought into force, the policies it contains take precedence over existing non-strategic policies in local plan, covering the neighbourhood area, where they are in conflict, unless they are superseded by strategic or non-strategic policies that are adopted subsequently. So the summary of that means that because the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan was made after the local plan, in relation to the NPPF, in terms of design, non-strategic policy, the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan design policy should take precedence. Go to the next slide, please. So the village position. We have no objection to the principle of property on this site. But we do object to the design and materials proposed that are in total contravention of the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan. The Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan had huge support at the referendum, 97%. And in part of the consultation, we asked the question about how important it was for new buildings to be in keeping with existing styles with preference against modern building materials. And you could argue somewhere between 88 and 98% said that was very important. And then if you start looking at the objectives of the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan, one of them in objective 1 is to provide good quality housing at all levels of affordability that respect the distinct characteristics of the village, using styles and materials that currently exist within the village. So, Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan Policy SID 3, so the next slide, says that development proposals should use building forms and materials that reflect the vernacular of the parish. It also said development proposals should also have full regard to the following design principles. And those principles are highlighted by the common use of the most important heritage assets in the neighbourhood area of traditional red brick, thatch, flint, flared brick headers in buildings and boundary materials. The common use of half-lit roof forms, clay and slate tiles, and timber window frames set with a deep reveal to accentuate shadowing. So that's what the policy design 3 says. Because the next slide, if you can compare the proposed materials for this development, you can see that as far as the materials of the roof are concerned, basically none exist in Sydenham of that nature. It's to be built a structurally insulated panel system. Nothing like that exists in Sydenham. It's proposed to have vertical cedar cladding. There's no vertical cladding. There's no cedar cladding in Sydenham. Yes, there is horizontal black cladding. Talk about aluminium windows with steel plate surrounds. That doesn't exist in Sydenham either. It's all timber window frames with deep reveals. Let's talk about aluminium rainwater goods. There's none of those in Sydenham. Interestingly, one of the officers' comments is that detailed finishing materials can be secured through planning conditions. Well, actually, that's not really realistic to secure it through planning conditions, because the design, the materials that are used are part of this radical design. It is a contemporary design. So, next slide, please. So, in conclusion, we believe there is material consideration in relation to design, appearance, and layout. The proposal completely contradicts with the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan design policies. And the reality is, if the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan policies are to be ignored, then actually one of the fundamentals of neighbourhood plan, we might as well not have them. What is the point of a neighbourhood plan having design policies which are supposed to be able to take precedent over local plan policies? If this isn't taken into account, neighbourhood plans are irrelevant. There is actually, in our view, absolutely no reason why a house complying with the Sydenham Neighbourhood Plan policies cannot be built, just as the recent examples in the village. The Grove was 8 houses, Greenaway is being constructed at the moment, Holly's closed a few years ago. So our view is very happy to have a new property put on that site. We agree with that principle originally. But fundamentally, if this proposal is approved, it flies in the face of everything in the neighbourhood plan, and we might as well not have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor May. Now, Councillor Ritchie, have we got any questions? Councillor McDonald.
Just a very quick one. So it's not the house itself. It's how it's materials.
It's a contemporary design which does not exist anywhere in Sydenham. Nothing like it exists.
Okay.
Sydenham is a Domesday Book village, the original heritage parts of it. Yes, there's lots of different types of buildings, but fundamentally, something that is being proposed is so far away from anything that exists in the village. We don't see the necessity of that type of property being built when a perfectly adequate property could be built using the design principles that are adopted within the neighbourhood plan.
You were married when you were 20 and that marriage lasted 33 years.
See no further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. May.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next speaker I have is Ian Gray, who's a neighbour and an objector. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Gray.
Lovely. Thank you very much. What I wanted to sort of run through tonight was, I guess, a little bit of context from my side. I'm a neighbour, so there's NIMBY there, but actually, it's following on from the parish council in one respect. The location of the development site, it's right at the end of Sydenham East, so it's defined as infill, but actually it's surrounded by countryside on 3 sides, and it's a hugely visible location as you come down the road and as you take in the important view up onto the Chiltern National Landscape. The report suggests that the view is to the southeast and that the plot is to the northeast, and therefore pretty detached from the view. There were 1 or 2 in the officer's visuals in the officer's report, photos in the officer's report, that highlight with the view as you take it in, as you come on Sydenham Road, the property will bookend the left-hand side of that view. So going back to materiality, it's very visible. It's not an infill site. It's not tucked away. It's on full view. All 3 sides, 3 out of the 4 sides, will be very visible. The property that's sort of magnified by the depth of the property. It projects back beyond the general 2-storey built line of Sydenham East by about 6 metres. So it's at the moment, if you approach Sydenham East, you've got a gable end, and it's a relatively low impact visual view coming as you approach the houses. What the development is about 9.5 metres with a pitched roof to the front, but then ridges running back. So it's 2 stories plus a roof across all of that. So it projects significantly back into the site, which sort of doubles the materiality concerns. The officer's report flags that there are concerns in the report over it being a dominant development over the loss of privacy because of the degree of projection beyond the rear 2-storey line of Sydenham East generally, and a significant visual intrusion. And what I wanted to do today, which hopefully I've done a little bit, is just to draw those concerns out, which are sort of otherwise to me lost in the officer's report.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Gray. Chrissy, has anybody got any questions, Mr. Gray? Councillor Tom.
Again, so the proposed property bookends rather than infills is one of the important aspects that you've raised.
To me, it's a highly visible property because it's not hidden. It's the new start of Sydenham East.
Okay.
It's probably one of the most visible properties, or will be one of the most visible properties in Old Sydenham.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Keithron.
Thank you, Chair. So the Sydenham neighbourhood plan, does it have I mean, you clearly you want to keep the look of the village. Do you have any sort of leanings to perhaps have a more modern? I mean, it's critical that that this is clearly a very different sort of building. Have you got an absolute sort of this we don't want that type of thing?
I mean, all I can do is speak to the village local plan that is very clear as to the desire for more traditional design and materials. I think my concern is the volume of the development will emphasise the difference.
Yeah. I mean, would it be mitigated if there were different materials?
I think the volume is still a significant concern to me in terms of impact on me on the other side, but impact on the wider view as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Mr. Gray. Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is Ian Slater, who's the architect, I believe, our supporter.
Thank you, Chair. I prepared the scheme my name's Ian Slater, and I prepared the scheme for you for a new house in East Sydenham. Outline consent was granted for a new dwelling in late 2023. Earlier this year, an application was lodged for a contemporary flat roof 2-storey dwelling. I met with the parish council, but it was clear they would not support the building or its materials in consideration of their neighbourhood plan, which planning officers upheld. The proposal was subsequently redesigned to take on board parish and officers' concerns. The application is before you this evening because officers now support the amended proposal and the parish council remains, stating, the overall design is a complete contradiction to the requirements of policy SID 3 in the neighbourhood plan and unlike any other property in the whole of Sydenham. The parish council's objections relate specifically to 4 elements of design. Structurally insulated panel system, otherwise known as SIPs. Well, SIPs are an energy efficient external structural wall and roofing system finished externally, in this case, with render and slate, and therefore the SIPs panels themselves are not visible. It's a modern method of construction. Secondly, brise soleils. Brise soleils are placed over the rear south-facing windows only to prevent the overheating and again are barely visible from public vantage point. 3. Vertical cedar cladding. This is a modern take on timber boarding. It is otherwise common in the village. 4. A steel plate surround to one first floor corner window and a front door steel plate canopy. Both are small contemporary features, the canopy barely visible behind the mature frontage hedge. The parish council objection also refers to the importance of the character and setting of the conservation area and heritage detailing and materials. That this site is more than 300 metres from Sydenham Conservation Area and nowhere near any heritage assets. The amended design has now a pitched roofs with eaves, ridge, height and pitch to match Park House next door. The external walls are white rendered with some first floor boarded areas under a slate roof. East Sydenham is an eclectic mix of 20th century styles and materials. A good number have white walls and slate roofs, including the local village pub, the Inn at Hemmington. The overall form and design of the amended proposal is therefore very much in line with many of the houses in East Sydenham. The proposed building has strong sustainability credentials. Its external envelope built in SIPs panels and an airtight membrane producing a very low air permeability building that requires a mechanical ventilation heat recovery unit providing healthy internal environment 24/7. Photovoltaic array and battery provides renewable energy generated and stored on site. An air source heat pump provides heat and hot water from a renewable source. SODC's design guide welcomes new development which adopts a simple form with good contemporary detail and respects its context, and the officer's report reinforces this view. I would therefore respectfully request you vote in favour of the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slater. Committee, any questions? Councillor Stanley.
So I think the councillor was saying that not that the SIPs were visible, but the slate roof was significantly different to anything else that is in the village, and also the timber. Not that there's no timber, but that type of timber, the direction and the design and everything, the material is significantly different, and also the steel plate surrounds and the reveals, and I can't remember everything he said, but I mean, he wasn't complaining. He wasn't saying that he has an issue with the SIPs. I don't believe. I think what he was saying was it was the slate roof itself, because that is.
There was an objection to the SIPs because there isn't a house built in the village, so therefore it doesn't need a neighbour.
But I think what he said was that visually that's quite different to the to the other houses in the village. Would you agree with that though?
No.
Okay. Can you explain?
The house has a slate roof. There are many slate roofs in East Sydney. The vast majority of the walls on all 4 elevations are white render. There's a lot of white buildings and white rendered buildings in East Sydney. So generally speaking, the external materials are very much what you do see in East Sydney. In actual fact, the officer had displayed some photographs showing a building that was white rendered and had slate roofs.
Councillor Gordon-Creed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Slater, do you have a visual representation in colour of what it is that you're proposing, so that, because in the shorthand it sounds like what the parish and the village perceive is that there's going to be something that is not in keeping on any level with the neighbourhood plan. It's going to be very visible as you come in. And so I really don't feel like I have enough information without some.
No, I appreciate that. And I did try to get CGI for the meeting tonight, but I just couldn't get it done in time, unfortunately. But that's my fault. I should have done that. I should have done that earlier, but no, I haven't. But happy to do that.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Dragonetti.
You heard Parish Council's presentation on the sort of hierarchy, if you might say, of the NPPF, the local plan, and then the village, the neighbourhood plan. But do you agree with that? So, was Councillor May's assessment correct?
I certainly don't disagree with some of the aspects of the neighbourhood plan. No, of course not. You know, that was taken democratically, and I don't know what percentage of the village took part in that, but it was a large percentage that agreed the terms of those deals. But what I would say is that unfortunately the neighbourhood plan, and I would say this, wouldn't I, doesn't allow for modern interpretations of what other village vernacular elements there are in the village, which is a bit of a shame, because my own personal view is that we should be building houses in the 21st century that are of the 21st century, not of the 16th, 17th, 18th century. Now, what I've done in the design is to try and take on board what I had originally heard when we put forward a flat roofed modern building on the site. The main objection at that time was that it wasn't a pitched roof, so therefore it was definitely a contravention of the neighbourhood plan, which is fair enough. We took that on board. Some of the materials that are used on that very modern building were modern and contemporary and very much of the 21st century, but they didn't like those. So I went away, we produced a building that had a pitched roof. It used materials on the external surfaces that matched village, the slate and the white render, and boarding, even though that's modern interpretation of that. So I don't disagree with the neighbourhood plan. Why would I? That was done democratically, and I fully respect that. But it is unfortunate that there isn't in a position in a village like Sydenham, particularly East Sydenham, that is not in a conservation area, that doesn't have any heritage asset buildings. And as I said in my speech, is a very eclectic mix of 20th century buildings, of buildings that you would have expected through the various decades of that century. Well, they don't, a lot of those buildings are not the same as those buildings that are in the conservation and heritage settings of West Sydenham. And this seems to me to be an opportunity to respect the elements of the neighbourhood plan, but to try and produce a contemporary building within that does have a lot of elements that are very much of East Sydenham, and that's what I'm trying to do here.
So you what am I right in saying that you don't really agree with the principle of the neighbourhood plan setting out that it should be that development should match the existing level? So there's nothing, I don't remember anything in the neighbourhood plan saying they welcome developments with contemporary detailing that that's something you could come forward with.
No, but then district council policies do.
Yes, but
and this district council.
Mr. May pointed out that in the questions of design, the neighbourhood plan takes precedence.
Yeah, well, officers obviously disagree, as I do.
Yeah, yes, okay. Can I ask you a further question then? In your design, the windows on the northwest elevation of bedroom 3, at the northwest, and probably the I guess not clear from these plans, but you have the windows on the corners. Is that right? So that's a very
contemporary,
very contemporary, isn't it? Are there any other?
Is it very contemporary? I don't. I mean, corner windows have been used on properties for decades. It's not unusual.
I think it's okay. Well, I don't quite see how that fits in with the ethos of the neighbourhood plan. But that has. Could you just explain what the thing was about the windows overhanging on the back? Could you just explain what those? I didn't quite understand what was being proposed there.
Breeze solid
screening, yes.
It's a very lightweight structure, which is almost a canopy, which you can see through, that has louvers on it, and they're positioned over large glazed elements to avoid overheating in a south-facing elevation, southeast or southwest elevation. So in the height of summer, the brise soleil will cast a shadow over the glass, and therefore reducing the amount of overheating that those windows might otherwise cause.
Yeah.
But in winter, when the sun is lower, that gets underneath the brise soleil and allows light and heat into those rooms during the winter months. Okay. So that's the brise soleil, but they're only on the back of the building.
Yes, I understand. That's a sensible idea there.
Yeah.
Okay, Kirsty. Any further questions?
Can I just clearly this is a very there's a big emphasis on sustainability in this design.
Yeah.
And you have made efforts to meet the objections to the ultra modern, and I have complete sympathy with that. I would be on the streets protesting with an ultra modern design like in a village with character, which does contain a conservation area. You do seem to have taken that on board and done what you can. I mean, do you feel, that trying to produce a sustainable building does mean that there is a certain, compromise to be made in materials? I mean, I notice there aren't any particular conditions about.
I don't think.
So you're not going to.
I don't think that's an excuse. Really.
No, fine. Just clarifying.
You can produce a building that looks like something that was built in the 18th century, that is modern and sustainable, of course you can.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Most of the ones I see are actually quite hideous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. I don't see any further questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Slater.
It's very difficult to know whether.
Okay, I hope that Paul Lucas is still there.
Obviously, I don't blame the
You're a local member.
given the circumstances.
Oh,
Yes,
local
indeed.
member.
You know, doctors,
Which are please do. So,
doctors can be
do you wish to speak as local members or
license for a period
is
of
reserved
time.
for the committee?
Do work to regain
Reserved
their
for the
ability to
committee.
practice. Just stripping someone of their
Paul.
license every time they do something wrong.
Paul Lucas.
Yes.
Yeah, you are there still. There
Yes.
you are. Right, committee. Any questions for Mr. Lucas? He just beat you, Ken. That's all right.
So essentially, it's already been established that property can go there, so there's no discussion about fill, infill, and so on. Right on that, I think, in front part. So the question here is the finish on the property, and it seems to come down to the vertical cedar boarding. Am I right in thinking that is that something we have to deal with the plan in front of us? I lost my question.
Lost his question. All right, Councillor Roberts.
I think I'm going to ask a similar question to what you are. Yeah, my question, Paul, is I'm a neighbourhood planner. You know, I spent 4 or 5 years on neighbourhood plans, and they do take a lot of time to put together. And at days like today, or when I've known them before, and I brought these up on Henley applications when the neighbourhood plan used to get overruled. So my main question is Paul, is the contemporary design. I think we've had some excellent speakers tonight. I think they both sides of the argument have been very good. So my question is the contemporary design on it, Paul. Why have you supported this against the Sydenham neighbourhood plan design?
Okay, yeah, it's a matter of really the interpretation of the Sydenham neighbourhood plan policy SID 3 and the various bullet points, and in particular the one that they've highlighted, which is at the beginning of the policy it says we have to have full regard to the following design principles. So in officers' view, we've had regard, or the development's had regard to the most important heritage assets in the neighbourhood area, and then it lists the various elements that comprise those areas that you find in those heritage assets. In this case, we've had regard to it, but what we've got to take account of is the fact, as the architect quite rightly said, there's some distance away from those heritage assets, so they don't form the immediate site context for this. The immediate site context is formed by the other dwellings in Sydenham East. So in terms of the relevance of that particular bullet point to this proposal, it has lesser weight than it would do, say, if the development site was in Sydenham West and very close to some of the more sensitive areas. It was in the conservation area, for example. I dealt with the application at the Grove many years ago, and we had to, it's a very different context to this one here, and so officers' view is to apply the principle of what the aims and objective of the neighbourhood plan policy is trying to do to make it fit in with the surroundings, and the other bullet points that they've got in there talk about the defining the essential character of the neighbourhood area, and obviously the neighbourhood area varies depending on which bit of the neighbourhood area you're in, and so the immediate site context, as you can see in the photos on screen, show a variety of dwelling forms, and as the architect was saying, they've amended the form to make it fit in more, to have this flat frontage, which is the more traditional version. There are other dwellings in the street there, you can see, with box dormers there, and there's a gables fronting on. That's less traditional, so it's more traditional in those sense. And then the material, I think my argument would be that slate is a more traditional material than some of the concrete tiles that some of the other properties have got, and slate is replicated on some of the other properties, as is render. And again, we agree with the architect that render is the main wall material. You have got the extra cedar cladding, and that is a new material to be added to this area. But in itself, I don't. Officers didn't feel that would be. We'd have sufficient grounds to resist the proposal on that basis.
Thank you. Well, sorry, any further questions? Councillor McDonald?
Yeah,
Peter.
Well, some of the I always think that one of the important features of a building is in the detail, not just the size and the form, but the sort of the finish and the detail. What strikes me particularly about this one is a very sort of flat and flat sort of building. Doesn't have much, sort of character really. Other than early projection, these rather, to my view, these rather horrible corner windows that seem to project, and especially just look at that our screen at the moment, so one on the top left, which is the first floor, and that is what you will be seeing when you're coming up from the approach to Sydenham. So it seems to me that particular detail has quite an adverse impact on the character of this area, and and therefore they're pretty much in conflict with the neighbourhood plan. Would you agree with that? Perhaps you wouldn't.
No, because of say that you can see the recommendation that officers are making, that detail in itself wouldn't have result in sufficient harm for us to be able to refuse planning permission, bearing in mind that it's possible to make alterations to existing properties. I haven't looked in close detail, but I imagine that along there you've got a number of different types of window forms. You certainly will have some UPVC in there. I think in one of the oldest properties in that row they certainly look like modern. The windows have been tampered with at some point. They don't have the original timber frame. So I think it's very difficult for us to specify, without there being something specific in either our policies, neighbourhood plan policies, specifically sort of turning away a particular design feature. Then it's very difficult for us to in itself use that as a reason to refuse permission in officers' view. I appreciate that this is very much a subjective matter for councillors to consider.
Okay, I see no further questions, so thank you very much, Paul. Okay, we've heard all our speakers, we've heard all the planning officer. We need a proposal.
Wow.
Go on, Peter.
I'm going to propose refusal of consent, because I don't think the neighbourhood plan sets out very clearly, and I think unusually, that the design is an important feature of their neighbourhood plan. It's their third policy, and I think that they have identified that this application doesn't match their design guide, and therefore I think it should be refused.
Okay, thank you. Is that supported? Councillor Gordon-Creed, you wish to speak now?
I will wait.
We'll wait. Okay. We'll wait for debate. That's okay. We have a proposal for refusal, proposed and seconded, so I open the debate. Councillor McDonald.
I'm going to come back to the scenery.
Between 3 and 4, and
so there are a number of properties in this lovely bit of Oxfordshire showing different time periods, and they show different features.
Maybe go for
and I sort of concentrate, as did the town council, the borough council, on particularly the cedar. I thought the windows were all right, but that effect is quite marked and quite different. I see a lot of tile roofs and brick and white cladding. That's fine. That's certainly within the area, as I've seen. But the cedar is a different. It's contemporary. But there again, you have to think: at what point do you go? Shall we go forward in the future and have something that's slightly more modern looking? Because it does have a lot of white render and so on. And so I'm sort of conflicted in this. I lean more to approval rather than refusal, but it is quite a difficult one, this.
Yeah, no. I don't often give an opinion, but it is very subjective. Very subjective. Councillor Alex.
And actually, I'm conflicted as well, but I'm leaning more to refusal at the moment. But I may well change my mind. Although this is contemporary, and I think the speaker, was it Mr. Slater, I think it was.
Yes,
I think he gave a very good story on this. I mean, many years ago, and I think this was brought up as well.
Pool, gym, complimentary Wi-Fi.
Do you look back in 100 years and see these same old basic houses? Or do you look back in 100 years and say, well, 60 years ago, that was the type of contemporary that was built. 40 years ago, this was it. And 20 years ago, you know, that was the start. Or do you keep the village to all the style that is at the moment? And I think it was a reasonably good argument. And I'm not really that contemporary personally. I like to see, you know, really good solid build. I'm a brick and tile man personally. I don't think you can get better than a decent brick, because there's no maintenance for that. Well, there's maintenance on that one shown there. Design wise, I think it's a square box actually. It's not what I would call a great design. So to call it contemporary is a square box with some cedar boarding, some other bits and pieces on it. Is it really contemporary? I don't think so. I think it's a pretty bog standard design, although I can understand where Mr. Slater's coming from. So I'm probably leaning a bit more for refusal than approval. And even if possibly, if it did get refused, Mr. Slater may well come back with a different exterior, which would suit the neighbourhood plan. But as I say, a lot of work goes into neighbourhood plans, and I don't think you need to throw that work away. And I think on this one, you possibly would do if you supported it.
Yeah, so Councillor Sutler.
So I think both objector, Councillor May, and supporter in the Slater both made very good presentations. They look very powerful, and they made very strong arguments. And just to say to Mr. Slater, I'm fully behind air source heat pumps, solar panels, batteries. I have them myself, so I'm very pro that, and I think it's the right way to go. I think the house is lovely in the right environment, but it is against the neighbourhood plan, and the design and appearance is important in a small Oxfordshire village like Sydenham. The pictures that were being shown showed a few oddities in Sydenham East, but actually the rest of Sydenham is very fit to postcard, and actually, why would you ruin that? And I think there's you know, going back to what Ken said about 100 years ago, something was new then. But I think there are examples where people look back in time and go, actually, that should never have been built. You know, I mean, there definitely are periods in the 60s where you go, well, all right, it was modern and contemporary then, but actually, it hasn't stood the test of time at all. And I think that's the kind of danger you've got with bringing something that is very cutting edge into a very old historic village like Sydenham, which is beautiful, you know, and an awful lot of time and care was taken when they were doing the Flint cottages. They're new, up to date, cutting edge, but they put a lot of effort into getting that right for Sydenham. Like I said, I'm actually very pro modern design. I think it's great in the right setting, but Sydenham is not the right setting for that.
Catherine.
Yeah, I would. It is difficult, this one, because anyone who's worked on a neighbourhood plan, as I have, you know, wants to fully respect it. And the trouble is, there's a little bit of tension here between interpretations of things. I mean, the neighbourhood plan I've worked on, which has, the town in question has a very large conservation area. We have a mix of historical houses throughout the town. We've also got a lot of modern development, but in our plan, we do say there should be room for more modern buildings, contemporary buildings, and we wouldn't object to well-designed contemporary buildings, because society evolves, times change, and you've got to adapt that, however historic you are, which doesn't exclude the fact that we had a particularly appalling proposal for modern buildings, which were vigorously opposed and in fact didn't survive the planning officer's scrutiny, so it didn't happen. So I do, have every sympathy. But I would say that whatever we decide now, and this is not an easy one, it is possibly really the parish council needs to actually look at evolution and actually to consider that, well, sometimes things do change and sometimes they need to, and it's about renewal and vigor. So which one could defend this is, I mean, there are aspects of this design I certainly don't like the cedar bit myself, but I do like the corner windows. I think that's a great idea, actually. But yeah, so I would just say pickling things is probably not great design in itself, and that might be a thing to reconsider next time you revise the plan, which still doesn't leave us with an easy decision, does it? So.
Right, so I think it's time to go back to the seconder.
So for me, regardless of whether Sydenham should revisit their neighbourhood plan for the future, we need to honour their neighbourhood plan now. And
sort of knocked on the door and then opened it, and I'm like, yeah.
And I'm utterly in favour of
you got front porch.
Contemporary eco design, which is
I said, yeah,
seems really fantastic with regards to the carbon footprint, etc. But in terms of
we got the sign saying
the turnout
through the letterbox, put it to
for
the
the
left,
issues that are under consideration here in Sydenham was extremely high, and for us to disregard that just seems
tight schedule,
disrespectful. And
to talk to me about it for 10 minutes.
Mr. May said, why have a neighbourhood plan if we're not going to honour it? And for the village of Sydenham, this is not in keeping with their neighbourhood plan, and they don't have any objection in principle to a house going there. So possibly with some tweaking, it could still progress. But in this iteration, for me, it is a simple decision to honour the neighbourhood plan of Sydenham and refuse this application.
Okay, thank you. Before I go back to Peter to sum up, I'll just have a quick word with planning officer.
So, Chair, I understand that the proposed promotion is essentially saying that it's the design and materials that causes concern here. There's acceptance that the principles of the development has obviously been accepted and established by the outline. And those that have spoken against have essentially said that they don't feel that this would enhance or complement the surroundings, having regard to the particular prominence of this end of road position that this sits on, notwithstanding the variety of dwelling types that we have seen in this part of Sydenham.
Would you include its conflicts? It's not in keeping with the Sydenham neighbourhood plan.
So we will refer to the relevant policies in the event of members supporting that.
We also can.
Well, I was just going to ask, we're talking about DES 1, 2 and 6 and items like that.
I would just defer to Paul and Lucas, if I might, on terms of Paul, could you, yes, on the assumption that the majority of members vote with the proposed recommendation for refusal. Paul, can you just quote which policies would be relevant to refer to there, please?
Yeah, be in the neighbour plan SIT 3 and in the local plan DES 1 and DES 2.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, okay, thank you, Peter. I'll let you sort.
Well, I think everybody has said here they're always conflicted about this one. Some people have a natural affinity towards contemporary buildings and in the right place, but everyone has expressed a conflict. Now, the thing about a building is, once it's approved and built, it's there for a long time. We only have one bullet in our gun, which is to approve or refuse it. And if we refuse it, then they can come back with another design. But if we approve it and it goes through, then we're stuck with it for X numbers of years. The problem, I'm sure it's very well built, so it'll be sort of 60 years or so. But I think we should take this opportunity to, because we are conflicted, to refuse it, and let's come back with give the applicant and the community another chance to come up with something that's ticks more boxes than this one does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, committee, we have a proposal for refusal on the grounds of Des 1 and
conflict with Des 1, Des 2 and SID 3 of the neighbourhood.
I'm sorry.
SID 3 of the
SID 3 of the neighbourhood plan. Okay, all those in favour of the proposal for refusal, can I see please show? I think that's unanimous. Okay. All right, thank you, committee. Sure, Sidney's quite happy at the moment. Okay. Just give us 2 minutes while I go and get a glass of water.
For those online, we're taking a very short comfort break.
I got some cream, so I don't know if you want to see if those strawberries are edible.
The design actually, we already designed outside, but actually probably sells it outside in
Right. Let's go on. Yeah.
I've seen this before. Anyway.
Yes. Right. Dennis? Yeah, we're good to go. Okay, so the next application is P24 S1731. 5 Esther Carling Lane, Rotherfield, Pepper. You can see that my colleague is wrapping up, so Peter, you've got a declaration.
I have a declaration of interest, because I have a personal friendship with one of the neighbours who's commented on this application. So, would you all good night?
Okay, the planning officer is Simon. Simon, you've been sat there very patiently and quietly, so thank you for that. So I'll hand it over to you.
The application now before the committee has been called in by the local ward member, as the officer's recommendation of approval conflicts with the views of the parish council. Household planning permission is sought for the conversion of an existing garage at the application authority into ancillary living accommodation. Garage is here in the corner. We match my screen that is on there. There's no planning condition requiring the garage accommodation to be retained as such, and the internal works would not require planning permission from the council. The external changes would include the bricking in of the garage door openings and the installation of windows to the front and side. One roof light is proposed for the northwest facing roof slope, the right hand side of the plan on screen. The report sets out the case for granting approval. I will, however, show some photos to put this into context. This is the existing garage building proposed for conversion. It was constructed as part of the housing estate in the late 1990s. No changes are proposed to the form of the building, just the fenestration additions. It would continue to have a simple functional appearance and a visual subservience to the host dwelling. This is the site view from the application property number 5, showing the existing garage door to the left and an interior shot of the garage as it is currently. This is the view from Esther Carling Lane. The space within the driveway exceeds the adopted parking requirements for this size of property. Clearly spaced for 4 cars, with the dimensions of the spaces matching Oxfordshire County Council's parking standards, which as council's adopted. And this is the view from further along Esther Carling Lane, with number 5 on the right hand side and the garage to the rear. This is a private road, the council has no parking control. This is the side elevation that would have the ground floor windows, which would be relatively modest, 2 of them, and 1 roof light on the right hand side towards the gable. The new front windows would be more than 30 metres from the dwellings to the south, more than 3 times the 10 metres recommended in the design guide. The building is at least 12 metres from the nearest part of the enclosed garden area of number 3. I'll show that on the screen. Just there to the left of the fences. That's the nearest property to the west. The roof light would be even further from the boundary, nearer 15 metres. This would be the view from the ground floor windows of the garage. Officers are satisfied that the proposed side windows would not result in adverse privacy issues. They would mostly overlook the neighbour's open parking area, and there would be a reasonable separating distance to the garden behind the fence. This is the position directly opposite the building from the neighbouring property. The roof light would be clearly visible from the neighbouring garden, however the distance is considered acceptable and in accordance with policy DES 6. This will be a fairly normal relationship in this type of context. The rest of the neighbour's garden with number 1 Esther Carling Lane in the rear. To summarise the report, officers consider the proposed changes to the building to be acceptable in terms of the visual impact upon the surrounding area. The proposal is also considered acceptable in terms of the impact upon highway safety and neighbouring amenity. It's recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. This does include a condition requiring the building to be used for ancillary purposes connected to the main house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Okay, we have three speakers. The first one is Councillor Sue Rowland, who I see is online somewhere. I see John Rowland, right? I presume that's Councillor Rowland. Councillor Rowland, are you there?
It's funny, all these emails are coming through from the staff going about working over Christmas. Yeah, I really don't think it's right. And like, you know, we haven't had a contract. We haven't.
Sorry, Councillor, could you switch your camera on and try speaking for us?
That everybody should work. And I thought, you know, Paula is one of them. Because she used to just work part-time.
I'm going to press on. I'm going to move on.
Term time.
And go to Councillor, sorry.
Of course, now that she's
Graham Broadhurst, I believe is here, an objector.
She's like, oh, this is outrageous.
You can't say what things for us.
Everybody should have to come in. Yeah, funny.
You have your 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because
my name's Graham Broadhurst. I'm both a resident of Vestacarling Lane and a director of the management company. I've been asked to speak to you on behalf of the residents and my fellow directors. There is one point that I would like to make before I start, is that it was mentioned in the planning papers that it was conversion of the existing detached garage. Whilst the garage is detached from the house, it is not a detached garage, it's actually semi-detached and shares a party wall with another double garage. I think that's important to note. The comments we are making is on behalf of the residents. It's interesting to note that of the 12 properties on the development, apart from the applicant, 11 residents have
if it's a
raised an
couple of
objection
hours, you
to the
go, oh,
development.
well, it's just, you know.
The conversion of the semi-detached garage to residential accommodation, in our view, would be inappropriate, insensitive, and out of character in keeping with surrounding garages and properties. There is no doubt that there is some loss of privacy. The proposed annex compromises the privacy of several other residents. Car parking we see as a significant issue. There are no pavements on the narrow road, and it makes it difficult for emergency service trade vehicles to access properties if there are cars parked on the road.
Well, we only used to have.
There is a history over a number of years of the applicant parking on the road and grass verges. At weekends and other times, up to 3 vehicles are parked on the garage driveway, and users of the annex could require 2 further additional parking spaces, which would exceed the statutory level. One vehicle using the garage driveway, and you will have seen this on the recent photos, is a large van which has been converted into a camper van. The view from the windows, which replace the existing garage doors, would partly be obscured by those vehicles. Usage of the conversion, the application is for ancillary accommodation for the use of the main dwelling. This could be difficult to control, and if SODC approves the application, conditions must require that the accommodation will be strictly for the use of the main dwelling house and remain so in perpetuity. In short, it can never become a standalone property, and nor can it be used for Airbnb or any other long-term or holiday letting arrangements. Any material change of use must be subject to a separate planning application.
Well, yeah, it's like
we feel it would set a precedent in as much that people could then approve for conversion of other similar properties in the neighbourhood. There is no evidence at present of similar conversions in the adjoining developments. The design of the development, the original development, was very well designed to comply with the original planning consent. It ensures that every property has maximum privacy for residents.
There's no public right of way over the land other than for the residents and those residents of properties in the adjoining Stevens Lane and Dove Lane. We would like to mention covenants, and whilst we are aware that planning committee do not take restrictive covenants into consideration, I think it is worth us mentioning these. Covenants say you must not park any vehicle on any other part of the development other than on the drive or garage forming part of the property. You must not permit the property to be used for any purpose other than as a private dwelling house for a single family. You must not erect or permit the erection of any other development on the property in addition to the 13 private dwelling houses that exist. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rawlers. Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, hi. Mr. Woodhouse, hi. You mentioned the covenant just now.
Do everything except let me.
Was that the covenant when the properties were first built?
Yes, they're built by Brian Holmes, and those were the covenants set by them at that time.
Okay, and are they still valid, or are they time bound?
Well, I think they are. Certainly, there was another person who had a camper van which they parked on the driveway, and I understand they're no longer there, but I understand that they actually had to find a separate place to park the camper van because it was.
Covenants are not an issue for planning.
Okay,
they're a private issue.
One of the main forms of it.
Mr. Rawlers says he's a member of the management company. It's probably for his management company to take that up, but not for the planning company.
But one of the main points in his objection was that parking is not allowed on the estate.
That's not an issue. It's not part of the planning application.
Well, you've mentioned it now, so we know it. So there it is.
I will come back to that later on in our discussions. Let's please stick to the planning application that's in front of us.
Okay, is just on car parking then, because you mentioned car parking. Would you say that there's a lot of residents who park their cars around the estate, or is it just a handful of people?
No, I would say there aren't any other residents who park apart from casually park to unload to deliver something to their house. No other residents park.
That's an issue for the planning committee, not for this committee. The management committee, not for this committee. Thank you. Any other further questions? Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I could probably go to the planning officer also. But sorry, can you just tell me the garages, which you obviously said there are two different garages? Who does the other garage belong to? Which number?
It belongs to property number 7.
It does. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Yes. Have any other garages been converted on the estate?
No, not on this estate or the adjoining estate. We've actually walked the estate and spoken to the chairman of the other residents association, and as far as we are aware, there are no other properties that have had garages converted. Most of the garages belong to detached houses, and they're set well within the grounds of the house. These are unique in as much that they serve. There are 4 properties in a terrace, and these garage service those 4 properties.
Okay, Councillor Gordon Creed, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Do we have any knowledge of how they're proposing to use the converted garage? That's one. And then the other is the amount of, there were a lot of motorbikes and things taking up space in that garage.
I think those questions are more relevant to the applicant.
Okay.
And not Mr. Rogers. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I see Sue Rowland is there. I think you're muted.
Turn your volume up. No,
think there may be an issue with your microphone.
Yeah,
Sometimes by unplugging or replugging.
The menu for the restaurant in the hotel. The dinner menu. And then it says you can have 2 courses for like £1 cheaper. Yeah.
No, if you had a written statement, maybe try and send it to me, and hope we might be able to do something.
Courses for like
we can't hear you at the moment.
So if we do like it, I think.
Maybe skip to the next speaker chat. If we can't get on, I'll say skip to the next speaker chat.
No, we can't hear you.
Just maybe down to the very speaker.
She's unmuted. It's her microphone that.
Yeah, but the volume is probably the issue.
That's just the volume of the microphone. It wouldn't be.
Exactly. We don't want to be made to have
the microphone's not on.
For the time being, Chair, I suggest maybe move on to the next.
I think we'll move on to our next speaker. See what maybe you can get that sorted out. On to our next speaker, who is Mr. Simon Bauer, who's the supporter.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Simon Bauer. I am the owner of number 5 and the applicant. Couple of points to make.
Could you switch your camera on, please?
Is that better?
That's better. Well,
yeah.
So
right, hopefully yeah, thank you very much. Let me first of all tackle the parking issue. I'm the first to admit that we have been lazy, is probably the best way to describe it, where my wife does occasionally park on the grass verge to the side of the property because it is closer to our front door. We had no understanding that any of the residents or the management committee had an issue with this, and I am somewhat surprised that all of a sudden this is being raised as an issue. We have a very good relationship, I believe, with all of our neighbours, and if it was an issue, I would have hoped that they would have raised it, and of course we would have immediately stopped parking there. On that subject of good relationships with neighbours, Mr. Broadhurst has mentioned that 11 out of the 12 or 13 residents have objected to our plan. We tried to do the neighbourly thing when we decided to submit the application, and prior to it going in, I rang on people's doorbells and dropped off a copy of the plans that we were submitting. And to a person, we didn't get any negative feedback. If anything, we got good luck messages and positive feedback from the neighbours. Unfortunately, we do believe that there has been one, possibly two, particularly dominant neighbours who have encouraged other neighbours to speak out in favour of rejection. That, unfortunately, is, in our view, why we have the volume of objections that we have. We are not making any proposed changes to the footprint of the property. Everything will be done to ensure it meets building regulations in terms of soundproofing and insulation. And also, we are absolutely committed to using it purely for ancillary accommodation to the main house. We have no plans to carve it off as a separate dwelling. We have no plans to register it as a separate address. We have no plans to set up brand new utility accounts for the annex. Everything will be shared from the main property, including access from our back garden. So we have two mothers. My mother and my wife's mother are both in their 80s. They live independently at the moment. both have some health issues, and one option is clearly, if required, to potentially move either or mother in where we can have a closer eye on, our relatives. My son is currently on a graduate program down in Brighton, training to be a chartered accountant. He qualifies next July, and we have talked to him about once he qualifies, he would potentially look to secure a chartered accountant's role in the Thames Valley or London, and living in the annex with a degree of independence would obviously be favourable to him at the age of 24 to living in the main house with mum and dad. So in summary, it will be ancillary accommodation for family and friends, and we would ask that the councillors and the planning committee recognise that we're doing this in the spirit of transparency.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
And we would seek approval to our plans. Thank you very much for your time. If you've got any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Yes, we do have a few questions. Councillor Sadler.
Yes, Mr. Bauer. How would you like it if the other garages in the estate also converted to dwellings? How would you feel about that?
I personally wouldn't have a problem with it, because these days very few people, if any, use their garages to store vehicles. So if it's practical for family reasons, I would have no issue with it.
Okay. Councillor Gordon-Green.
Mr. Bauer, going back to the storage of what's in the garage currently, what will you be doing about that so that the neighbourhood is not then filled with extraneous vehicles?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we would be doing, our neighbours would see a couple of skips on the drive. We've got far too much stuff in the garage that we don't need, and we will be disposing of or selling. The remaining stuff, which will be mainly garden maintenance equipment, we would be looking to put a garden shed inside the boundaries of our garden for storage of lawnmower, strimmer, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bauer. I don't see any further questions. Thank you. Right, are we able to get back to Sue Rowland?
No, still nothing comes through. So there should be a microphone sign near the top right hand side of your team screen, and there'll be a little drop down arrow next to it. If you click on that, that should give you the options about where your speakers are coming from. And you can see if any volume is coming through.
Yes, Mr. Bauer, could you turn off your camera now, please? Thank you. I think we're going to have to abandon this, Sue. We cannot get through to you. We cannot hear you at all. I think we've had enough attempts to try that, and we can't get through. All right, thank you. Right, we'll move on. Joe Robb and James Norman are the ward councillors. They are not on the call and have apologised for the meeting. So, yeah. So we go back to Simon Kitson for questions for the officer. I'm sure we have some. Councillor Arnott.
Yeah, Simon, the item in front of me, I don't really have any plans or elevations. I can see them on the screen. Have you got any?
No, I haven't got those.
There's the bigger ones that should have been attached. No, I've just got.
No, we haven't got that.
We've got 2 pages. Got that one and that. Please. Where are yours from?
Appendix A.
Yeah, appendix B is got.
Appendix B.
We haven't got appendix B.
I've got that.
It seems that some table descriptions haven't got an appendix
Oh, no.
B, but we'll show them on the screen. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I'd like to zoom in because obviously the original plan was looking at the letterbox. It was a normal plan, but
Well, my first question is it meant to be on 2 floors?
yes, there's 2 stories, hence the roof like there. First floor level, that's a bedroom. Ground floor is a basic living room, kitchen. With 1 bathroom, very small level of accommodation against the intended purpose. So that's the side elevation there. So that's to the northwest. These window openings that are facing the driveway to the left-hand side. And to the front elevation, these windows, this would be bricked in. They're keeping the brick head above it and using facing brick, and then 2 casement windows in place of the garage doors. Nothing else changing external.
Let's carry on. Yeah. What? You'll probably be being negative with this response, but don't you consider this is too alien away from the house? I can understand if the garage would have been next door to the property. I may well have understood this, but you know, to be in, I don't know, 20, 30 yards away from the house, nothing else like that around there. It just looks totally alien.
Well, I mean, there were windows on the garage at the opposite property, I suppose, for starters. The actual building is, in my view, it's respecting the hierarchy of buildings on the site. It remains simple, functional form, consistent with our design guide. The main house is still the dominant element of the property, and I would argue there is a functional connection between the two. The garage is at the bottom of the garden, and it has got a path leading to it. It's got an existing door that we can utilise. Yeah, I mean, some of these are subjective elements. No.
Well, my final question, is there enough room in the roof there?
Well, because they're not proposing a dwelling, they don't have to comply with the national space standards. I believe building regs would probably allow that. It goes up to 2 meters to the ridge, I think shown from the plan.
But when you said it's, sorry,
I mean, it is a planning matter anyway. They have to comply with other legislation. If what they're proposing.
Through you, Chairman, when you say it's not a dwelling, you know, the applicant suggested that his mother-in-law or mother would live there, so surely that would make it a dwelling.
Well, it's additional accommodation functionally associated with the main house. It's not for independent occupation.
But it is a dwelling. People are living there, so it's a dwelling. Can you just go back to the plan to provide clarification? Because there's a comment that it's a semi-detached building.
Yeah.
Is it the gable that's the attached?
I'll show you what the plan. So this is the application property. Yes, they're quite correct. And apologies for any confusion. It's semi-detached in the sense that it's attached to the neighbouring garage. I think the point I was making was it's detached from the main house.
Yeah.
But yes, the building is semi-detached. In my view, it doesn't really have any bears and planning there. The proposal. It would if they were extending the building or raising the ridge height.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, questions. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. So in the internal plans, is the proposed sleeping? Where's the sleeping element? Is it?
It's in this space.
Above.
Centre, yeah. There was a section, yeah. So it's in this area here. I imagine the floor level will be reconstructed at this sort of point, and then you've got the space at the roof for the occupant to sleep.
And that makes somewhat challenging for the 2 80-year-old mothers managing this accommodation. But
yeah, I mean, obviously we have to consider fact that this building would remain as this in the longer term, as so long as it's occupied by a family member and it's not occupied independently of the main dwelling, then they're not in breach of the ancillary occupation condition. I believe the applicant raised the possibility that his son could use it as accommodation.
Yeah.
We're basing decisions based on this.
Can we just see the layout, because we haven't got copies of that layout that you're showing there.
Yeah.
That zoom in on the bottom part.
Yeah, just to stress that anything inside the building, it's not an active development in planning terms. They can convert the building internally. It's once they start making changes to the exterior of the building, it's an active development that requires planning permission.
And it's used presumably.
Well, and it's use, yeah, but they're not proposing to something like the planning. It would still remain part of number 5. That's the Carling Lane. In terms of the layout they're showing on plan, yes, there is a living space here, and they're showing a shower and a kitchen unit and a bedroom at first floor level.
Right. Any further questions? Thank you, Simon. I think we understand it, but so I'm looking for a proposal. Councillor Sadler.
I would propose we go against officer recommendations.
Sorry?
I would propose that we go against officer recommendations.
Oh, so you're proposing that we refuse it?
Yes.
On what grounds?
Character of the area, overdevelopment, in that it's the design of that house and garage was not, wasn't designed in that respect for additional people to live there. And it's setting a precedent as well for
that's not a planning reason.
Okay, well, I'm going to say it anyway. It is setting a precedent for the.
Setting a precedent is not a planning reason.
Okay, but it's part of what I'm saying.
Like the other ones.
Chair, would you like me to offer some advice at this stage? So we have 3 potential concerns raised there. The impact on the character of the area is obviously subjective, but if we look at the plan, the changes to the building are really very modest. It is taking 2 garage doors, bricking up part of that space and putting in a window that would no doubt match existing windows that we've seen in both the elevation, one of the existing elevations, I think, that we had on the screen. You just perhaps get that up. And we saw in one of the neighbours' garages, there are already windows that feature in some of the side elevations. So the materials look synthetic and to respect the details of surrounding buildings. Overdevelopment, we would have to describe how we think this is an overdevelopment, and I would point to the fact that this has a generous amount of parking. 4 cars, I believe, could be accommodated in front of those garage doors. We can see 2 quite large cars there being accommodated in front of the garage. Another way that an overdevelopment might be cited is where there's an inadequate garden. We saw that the garden will remain the existing size that it is. So I think it would be very difficult to demonstrate that this is an overdevelopment. And as the chair referred to precedent and fears about what might happen in the future, I'm afraid can't feature as part of a reason for refusal. So
okay, that's the opposite.
Sorry, are you rejecting my
this is the opposite opinion. Yeah, on your proposal. I have not got a seconder yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second it, but I just want some decent reasons for it. I just think it's totally inappropriate.
We've got picked up, but we do need to have planning.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, let me come back then. Yeah. So design and appearance and layout is a material consideration. In terms of changing the design of a purpose-built garage in the state of houses that are all largely similar, with simple constructions, as we keep talking about, simple lines and so forth, to actually then just brick up a couple of garage doorways and put windows in it, I would argue that that's a conflicts with the design of the estate.
That will make it out of character.
Is principle of design an issue? Is that a material ground?
Well, I would definitely go for DES too. It definitely doesn't enhance the local character of the area. You know, if you're going to stick that there, it's totally alien to anything there, so it can't enhance it. You know, okay, the building is still the same, I accept that, but what it's there for doesn't enhance the area. You know, it depends how you look at DES.
So we're getting into debate before we should be in debate.
And for clarification from the officer that in my view, it's not ancillary to the house, it is a separate, independent, lovely bit of accommodation that we're looking at. I don't know if that is a reason for refusal.
It's not what you can't, because they've stated that it is, the application is for it to be ancillary to the house. So if it was for a separate dwelling, then we could turn it down. But it's to be ancillary, so we can't actually turn it down that reason.
Fair enough.
I feeling that no one on the committee is happy with this, but we need to find sufficient reasons for refusal.
I'm not unhappy.
You're not unhappy?
No. Well, I find it difficult. I mean, the fact that we are finding it difficult to find coherent reasons for refusal. I mean, whatever, we're not allowed to go beyond what is actually here, so just focus on that. It's not unreasonable. I mean, it is perfectly true that very few people use garages for sticking cars in. You know, wherever you go, you find that different things are being done with them. And this is a time when, you know, I mean, the sun, for example, is a very valid point. I can't see getting your 80-year-old mother-in-law up there, but, you know, so I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, I'm agnostic, I have to say, but I'm not sort of banging the drum for outright dismissal.
Okay, I don't know where we're going actually. How are we doing?
I hear the concern around the change from those garage doors to windows, producing elevation that some members are saying results in a building that's out of keeping. I have concerns about the council's ability to defend a reason based on that. And certainly any reference to concerns about how the building might be used in the future and be separated off but not forming part of the reason for refusal when that's not part of what's been before us.
And all the objections are not reasons for refusal.
Well, on DES 2 and on design of character, do we accept that it doesn't enhance the local character, and it, you know, and it is you know, and the overall type of building that it is a significant change to the estate that's been put there. And I realise we can't talk about governance because that's not a material consideration, obviously. But you know, the parking doesn't really allow for people to park in other places. The parking will be an issue if that is allowed to be used as a dwelling as well, because a dwelling as well means additional people and normally means additional cars.
And in terms of car parking standards, they would meet.
It meets all the standards and all the requirements, and although we don't like it, I can't see any reasons, planning reasons, why we should put it forward for refusal.
Yeah, I feel very torn on this because on the one hand, it's a reasonable wish to provide an extra bedroom, basically, is what they're doing for relatives or sons or whoever the heck of their family.
Not for an 80-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. On the other hand, this estate was built with a design in mind, and no one, if everyone else converted their garage to living, you know, the whole place would change, and everyone living there would be negatively affected.
Yeah. Can I ask Simon's view, because he's obviously lived with this application for quite a while and sort of cogitated on it.
Well, we have to consider each case on a particular basis, how it sits within the estate, whether there will be parking implications if they were to do something similar. I mean, the relationship with some of the other garages is clearly very different to this. You've got a number of garages that are far more detached from their house dwellings. If you see the ones to the rear, you've got some garages that are attached to the house. I think, they're all very different in development. They've got a different relationship to the street scene, different parking arrangement. This one has got a particularly generous driveway to the front of it, which isn't replicated elsewhere in the street. I think it'd be quite easy to distinguish between one proposal and another. As everyone said, the precedent is not. No, you can't use that one. The only one I can think of is out of character.
Yes, I mean,
the character of the area is the only one we can actually.
That is a judgment as to whether you think that the change those two garage doors to windows. I'm sorry, can we go back to the elevation? Whether that is a change that would cause harm to the character of the area, as you say, Chair. So it's a
that's the only one I could pin anything on, really. It's very subjective. But if Councillor Sadler is happy to go along with that, we'll debate that. It's all we can come down on is character of the area. It's out of character with the area.
So that was the proposal. Was that seconded by Councillor?
I'm not sure that.
I don't know. That's why I'm going back to Councillor Sadler to see if that's what he wants to put forward. If he doesn't, I'll put it forward myself.
Yeah, I that is what I would go with, because I think that that housing estate, from what we've seen of it, it looks like they're all very similar types of dwellings. They have garages that are either quite near or quite far from the houses, but they're separate from the houses. It's not like a garage conversion where you've got a garage attached to the house, and one could argue, is it really part of the house anyway, and so forth. I understand some of those situations can be a bit more difficult to judge. This is quite different because it sits away from the house. It's actually nearer other houses, it seems to me, than the house it belongs to. So it is going to be, it is potentially going to cause other issues for other residents anyway, such as noise and disturbance. But I'm going to stick with character because I think that's the fundamental. I think
it's fundamentally out of character with the area. Yeah, and that's one that you could support.
So I mean, obviously you've heard my advice, but in terms of framing a potential reason for refusal, it would be around having regard to the detached, or albeit semi-detached, nature of this building, and the established character of the area, noting that no other conversions have taken place to date, that this would be out of keeping with the established character of this part of the Esther Carling. So is it Drive Lane? Yeah.
Okay, if we're content with that, I will second it. Unless you want to, Ken.
No, I just want to speak.
Also,
yeah.
I will second that, and we get a debate.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favour of the proposal for refusal, but I would just like to make the comment that in Henley, numerous garages have been changed to residential areas, be it a lounge, a kids' playroom, this and that. But they've just about all been internal garages or attached to the property. And I think this one here, it's almost if you're going to make another property, rather than just give a bed to somebody. And the whole feeling, it doesn't feel good on what's taking place here. Would other people follow? I'm not sure they would do. It's obviously down to the owner of the property here. But I just feel it's just so far away from the property. It's almost another property, and I think although it's would be what's sort of ancillary to the main house. Yeah. I'm just looking. The other planned applications this property's had on it, the main property. I'm not sure what is it, a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, the property itself.
We're gonna have that.
Yeah. So I would imagine that a 4-bedroom property, and that's why it just doesn't make sense what's taking place here. I think it's just finding the correct reason for refusal, and I think we would have a solid case.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howlett. Does anyone else wish to speak? I'll go back to the proposer then. I think I said it, remember? I think we said what we're going to say, aren't we? So we'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour of the proposal for refusal on the grounds of character of the area.
Having regard to the detached nature of the garage, the alterations would be out of keeping with this part of Estacani Lane, and concerns around it being tantamount to an independent of an independent dwelling.
Okay. All those in favour of refusal, please show. 5. Those against the proposal? Or against the proposal? So that one is reduced. Thank you, committee.
We've got another item, yeah?
Oh yes, just one ready for noting.
It's for noting.
Appeals information for May and June. We are supplying you with information about appeals lodged over in each month, appeal decisions received, and also how we're doing in relation to the government's current performance standards on appeals, which is good. So the only standout point that I think I would draw your attention to is the water stock appeal referred to in appeals lodged in June, where we have a public inquiry which may last up to 16 days in respect of an application that we refused for commercial development near junction 8A of the M40 on the water stock.
This has been like 25 years.
Yeah. So some of you will know that we've received many applications over the years on that.
Well, that's the one on the daughter, isn't it? Yeah. Before I close the meeting,
can I just ask a question? Why has my partner here got coloured paper? I've got black and white.
Because he might have used his own printer. As if I didn't have your papers in advance.
The King speaks this morning. The planning committees are going to become more professional, whatever that means.
May I ask Paula about that water stock appeal that you drew our attention to?
Yes.
That's already scheduled, is it?
So that's an appeal that's been lodged. Yeah. And we now have dates for in October when that will be heard. And that will be a public event that if you wish to attend, will be able to.
Do we know where?
It's going to be split on the venues. If you don't mind, I will confirm that because we're in the process of making bookings. So
okay. Right. Well, when are we meeting again?
On my meeting, let me get my date right. It's the middle of August. I think it's the 14th, Darry, for 14th of August.
14th of August. Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. Thank you for your attendance tonight. I think it's interesting. Maxine, should have finished an hour ago. Am I going to miss the chance?
Susie, please could we end the broadcast?
Oh, should have.
Yeah, sorry, we stopped streaming.